become aware of?
There is a terrace on one side of the bridge, on the right side of the bridge if you're facing the bridge, on the other end in the distance, and they have a restaurant outside on the terrace that people can come and specifically eat lunch out there. And it seems very, very affluent, very, very fancy, very, very elitist.
Tell me more about that.
There are waiters with big trays of, it looks like seafood on ice, and something like champagne, but not the same. The bottles look bigger and they're green.
They're green bottles, and they're bigger.
And they're bigger than a regular bottle of champagne would look. But it seems to have that same fizzy, alcoholic kind of smell and look to it.
Okay.
I feel like I'm there and I'm making a scene.
What are you doing there?
Just come out of the water, and everyone is just looking at me.
Why?
They're not sure what I'm doing there. I'm running.
You're running? Why are you running?
It's trying to escape.
I see.
And I've just walked in. It's the middle of the day. And I've just swam there.
Where did you swim from? Do you get a sense?
The other side of the bridge. From there, I went up onto the bridge and then I jumped off the bridge. At a lower point, not at the highest point.
Do you get a sense of why you jumped off the bridge?
I was definitely being chased by something. They were looking for me.
They were.
And I felt that I was going to get caught anyway, that there was no way I was ever going to be able to leave. But I tried it anyway. There are dogs there looking for me now.
They are.
I see them up on the bridge with the officers. They smell me.
What do these dogs look like? Can you see them?
Yes, they're black and gray, like a Doberman pinscher. And they're very fierce looking. I've been able to scare people enough to just keep getting away from them.
Why are people scared?
I think they know who I am.
Oh. And who are you?
I think they look at me like I am a sideshow of a carnival.
Do you look a lot different than they do?
I am different than them, and they know it. And they know. They look down on me because I am not Atlantean.
Okay.
And I'm from something beneath what they consider to be a citizen or a member of their society.
Oh, I see.
They see it. And I think I have been there for a couple of years, but I'm still young.
But you're still young. How would you describe yourself there?
I would no more than 30. In my later 20s, but no more than 30. I am desperate.
You're desperate.
Desperate.
What do you look like there?
I have very curly hair, and the gray streak that was in it up in the front has grown wider. I look like I have many wrinkles around my eyes, and my face looks very sallow, yellowish, because I have not seen sun in a while. Very pale, very sick and tired looking, with dark circles under my eyes. Become very thin.
Become very thin.
Weak. Swimming was very hard. But there was something under the water when I was swimming. Like you jump in off this cart and you can breathe water, breathe under the water.
Tell me more about that. How do you do that?
There seemed to be this cart, almost like a roller coaster, that would go from up on the bridge and take you down into the water, and you could tour. Looks like they had an underwater area, like an underwater world people could visit under there for the day as like a day trip, a way to entertain themselves.
And they would take a cart?
And you would take a cart underneath, and when you would enter the water, it would be scary, like you were crashing into the water, but once you were under, you could breathe.
Oh.
They had done something to the water, poured some type of oxygenated process where they use a machine and pour these bubbles into it, and it makes it so that you can breathe underwater.
And people would go there for the day?
And they would go for a couple of hours at the most.
What would they do?
They would swim and visit this underwater area. It's more of an area, like with some buildings and
Tell me more about it.
Underwater garden.
Oh, okay.
It looked like just a novelty place.
Oh, okay.
But they had figured out how to do that.
Is there anybody there today when you go down there?
There were a couple of younger people, younger children,
What do they
their
look
parents.
Like? What do
It's
they
hard
look like
to
there?
tell underwater because
Oh, okay.
they have brown hair, very light colored skin, but they seem scared of me as I fall into the water
Oh.
and swim away. I only glimpse them for a moment
Right.
as I try to swim and get up past this restaurant.
And what happens?
They stop me when I get back up to the other end of the bridge. They have guards blocking both directions. And the water underneath is a circular moat that if I were to jump into it, it would just bring me in a circle all the way back to that area.
Oh.
If I swam all the way around it. And it protects the center part of the city where I was being stored.
So this water protects that city?
This moat protects
moat.
that city. And then there is a second moat surrounding, again, outside the next circle of land. And that is our reservoir for drinking water. But the inner one is for tourism activities. And
Tell me more about that.
it looks
Tourism?
like they've... Well, what we would call tourism, what you would do during a day out visiting in the place that you live.
Okay.
Activities to do.
What would people do?
They would experience the novelty of breathing underwater.
Oh, okay. Okay. And so that was the first place, the first moat?
That's the first moat. It's
Okay.
more of a centerpiece to display their wealth and power. And the second moat that surrounds the next the next ring of an island is an irrigation for people, for water and reservoir. And it just seems there's a lot of commotion and them following me around. They will not let me leave there. They've told me I will never leave. So there's no point in even trying, that I could never get far enough. And even when I do get far enough, that there is nothing beyond them, that it's all gone.
It's all gone?
That it's all gone. And I know they're right because I watched it wash away.
Tell me about that.
I think this is the day I realize I never leave. I will never leave alive.
Is this the first time that you tried to escape?
This is the furthest I ever get.
Oh.
Is jumping into that water.
How did
and
you
running out.
How were you able to get away and try to jump into that water?
There was a woman that was doing an experiment on me, and she made a mistake.
Oh.
And she was supposed to lock me in this tube-like container and then go right to the processing room and pull the levers to begin the experiment. It's kind of like an X-ray of the whole body at the same time. And it would tell you very detailed specifics down to the ventricles on the body. It wasn't just for bones. It would tell you almost like a 3D image of my body and recreate it in a hologram for them so that they could see what was going on inside of me, even down to the synapse of the brain firing off. And she forgot to lock the door of the tube and said she was going to use the bathroom. And I kicked the tube open and was able to get out of the building and just started running.
Oh.
And it probably brought more attention to me that I was running. Had I taken a moment and maybe used some material to disguise myself, I probably would have gotten further. But it was so quick and such a commotion, there was no plan.
Right.
But I realized then they will never be as careless as to let that happen.
I see.
There is nowhere to go.
There is nowhere to go.
There would be nowhere to go. 'Cause this seems like the end of humanity is there.
Tell me more about that.
I had never heard of another culture outside of our own, except for tales my grandmother had told me of the blonde other ones that they had heard of. And then we saw them before we had our empire destroyed.
Right.
But they didn't. They just...
So they captured you, and then what did they do?
They did, for the first few years, many experiments on me.
Tell me about those.
They were trying to figure out how I was able to utilize that red gemstone. There was something that felt like flashes of light, but with blue and purple light being flashed at me.
That's what they would use?
That was one thing, one type of an experiment. It just feels like I'm strapped to a table but in a standing position, and I'm strapped. My arms and my leg, and even around my mouth, they've put something, and it feels like an ultraviolet light is being flashed at me and flashed. And it doesn't necessarily hurt, but it hurts my eyes a lot. And it makes you go a little crazy because it goes on and on and on for hours.
What do you do in this time when they do this to you?
I try to go into my head and think of ways to escape. Think of what's different from the day before. I try to notice any patterns they have, any escape routes I may see. I try to keep myself sane by doing that. And I try as much as I can to not meditate. I think they will figure out more about how this energy is channeled if I do. So I try to keep myself thinking constantly about my escape.
Do you know how this energy is channeled?
I do. And it is something that takes a very long time to cultivate. And it's taught as a very young child, but it is a set of movements that allow you to open up and receive it. But the channeling must be done by someone who is a receiver. It can't specifically be done by just anyone.
How does the person know if they're a receiver?
They can feel it. They feel it and they know. But they don't know how to do it. It needs to be taught. It's not something that is taught, that is just an instinct of, and then I know how to do it. It is almost like a prayer in the movements, and then an incredible focusing must be done, where you feel yourself focusing from in the middle of your brain almost, from behind the eyes, right in there, in that area, in the gland, and it must be focused. And then the stone must be raised up and put towards your heart and absorbed into you.
Which stone?
It is a red garnet-like stone that has many cuts on it. Beautiful cuts, but many, many cuts to make it look very, very deep and glittering, but very deep.
So is this a particular stone? Is it used for this purpose?
Yes.
So first you set the intention or the prayer, and then you look from behind your eyes.
It feels like you open up with the prayer, that it opens you up to it. It clears the space.
What's the prayer?
It's not specifically a prayer, but it's movement that opens you up, that allows you to pull out all of your energy and become a receiver.
Well, give me more information on that.
It allows you to move in. It feels like when you first go into a shower and you allow the hot water to go down just the back of your head, down your spine, and relaxing it, and bowing down towards that with your hands up by your eyes. And then down to your knees.
So you bow
and
down?
Back up again, standing straight up with your hands.
So you bow down, or you put your hands up to your eyes and go down to your knees and then back up?
Yes.
So it's a movement?
It seems like a movement that's done in repetition, while you then use that repetition to put yourself in almost like a trance, and then you are ready to focus once you are there. Once you it feels like a not a sting in a bad way, but like a jolt almost in your body. You can feel it.
Okay.
Like a it's more than just a vibration. It's like a snap in electricity that hits you all of a sudden, and you know you're ready to start focusing. And then you stay very still and breathe very deeply, and you go inward into the brain as you raise up the gem and you bring it to your chest, and allow for that to be absorbed into you. And then you just go to, it looks like a wormhole. You can travel through it mentally to communicate with the home planet.
Oh, tell me more about that. What do you do when you communicate with the home planet?
There's really not much there. There are just energy vats that are left of people, and they can't communicate in words with you, but they can communicate in feeling.
Okay.
And give you answers to things that you are figuring at the moment, with good or bad intention feelings that they will transmit to you. You get your answers through the way they feel, not by words. They seem speechless almost, that there's no need for words at this point.
I see.
Almost like they're not ghosts, but like a ghost, like a vaporized energy.
Can you communicate with them right now?
Yes.
What happened to them?
They had a very long history as an experimental planet. And they ran out of resources, but had neighbors and other planets that helped to deplete these, and fought each other until there was very little left. And then there was a time of transition for that planet. They sent people out to seed throughout the universe. And those that were left evolved into these beings, this spirit-like energy, because they hit a point in learning and evolution that allowed them to transition to this. And that's all that is on their planet now. But it was a process of removing the arguing, the resources, the fighting, breaking it all down to having no reason to do any of those things that allowed them to transition. So it was a very long, arduous process of them remembering the goal, which was to become to this, to morph into this.
I see. So you don't meditate and talk with them because you don't want the captors to know how you do this?
Yes.
Do you ever try to do it alone?
Yes. But I am often afraid that they are still able to monitor me, so I'm very careful about how far I go and what I allow them to, what I ask of them.
What do you ask of them?
I ask them if I will ever leave, if my child is truly gone.
What do they say?
They are very sad. I could feel the sadness off of them. I don't need to have them tell me, but I know.
I see.
It hurts for them to tell me.
Right.
Because they have been communicating with me my whole life.
I see.
Yes.
Your child now is in spirit. Can you communicate with her?
No.
Why is that?
I'm not sure. I think I'm too distraught to allow myself to break down that wall to do it.
See.
There's too much of a blockage there to communicate.
I see.
I don't think the child understands what has happened, and it is caught in the in-between.
Oh.
And it is very hard to break through on there.
I see.
There
and how do you
seems
know this?
This is what I feel from them.
I see. Okay.
There seems to be many that were caught like that, though, that they died very quickly, and they're still not aware that they're dead, and they're very lost and confused.
What do they think happened? They just don't know.
They think they're still alive. They haven't processed that yet.
I see. What do they do?
They kind of just wander around, and they just look. They look to make sense of it, but it's so hard to do from that perspective. If I put myself there for a minute, it's very confusing. It's like someone telling you sitting there right now that you're dead, and you don't believe it because you feel very alive.
When that happens, is there anybody, any kind of angel or guardian there to coax the person to the light?
There is, but if they are not believing that they have transitioned, they will have to stay in that place until they are ready to accept that.
Oh. Do you get a sense of how long that took for them?
It was different for every single one of them.
I see.
For my baby, for my little girl, it took quite some time.
I see.
Because it's harder for the little ones sometimes if they are searching for something.
Yes.
And they are searching for something that they can't find on the other side.
I see. Okay. Right. What kind of experiments did they do on you?
They did things that were very, very cold and scientific. I feel myself strapped to a lot of tables with a lot of orbs around me.
Tell me more about that.
It's not wires. They put you in like an orb, and you float a bit in the middle of it, like an anti-gravity aspect to it.
What was the purpose of that?
And what it does is it tries to do something to your genes where it can go in and it could tell them about your genetic history. And they want to know my genetic history, where we came from. They want to know why we were on the other side of the planet, and they think they can figure that out by looking at these markers and our codes.
Are they able to figure that out?
What they figure out is that we all came from the same place.
Oh. From the same planet, you mean?
That their seeding and our seeding were from the same planet.
Oh.
Even though there is diversity in the way we look, that was entirely environmental.
Okay. See. What other kinds of experiments would they do on you?
They would do these things with waves, with the water. Where they would try and submerge me in it to see if the isolation of the water would get me to instinctively start using my skills, my power, my gifts. I don't know what you would call it. It never felt like anything different to me until these people came into my life. They would try to hook me up to these other devices and shock me over and over again, and shock me and shock me. And I just felt chattering. I can remember my teeth just chattering and biting on my tongue, and biting off a piece of my tongue, and tasting the blood. They did as much torture as they did experiments, because as many experiments as they did, they really did not get the answers they wanted, even though they did learn a lot from me. And the more I was successful at hiding how to communicate with these originators, the harder it was.